Hello, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, back again today to do another review of a top-of-the-line / Summit Fi level headphone. And if you saw the title of this video, you know that that is the Focal Utopia. All right, so quick housekeeping notes. If you like what you see on my channel, please like and subscribe and do those things that you do for YouTube channels. And please also be on the lookout for how you can continue to support me in other ways going forward so that I can continue to bring you fun content like this. All right, the Focal Utopia, the top-of-the-line model from Focal, which lists for 4,000, just shy of 4,000 US dollars. I think 3,990 technically from Focal's website. And curiously, and I don't know why this is, and if anybody knows why, I am genuinely curious. Please tell me down in the comments. The price for this in euros is 4,400, which translates to just over 5,000 US dollars. So I mean, if you're one of my European audiophile friends over there, I don't know why this is more expensive for you, even though it comes from France. It says right in here, fabriqué in France. I don't know why it doesn't say fabriqué in français, but whatever. Okay. So anyway, specs and features of this. So again, it is a dynamic driver, which is uncommon at the top of the line. The only other dynamic driver headphone that I can think of that is this price or more would be that closed back Hi-Fi Min. I think that's something R10. I forget the exact model number on that, but that one's up there too. Okay, the nominal impedance on this Focal rates at 80 ohms with a 104 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity. So that does make it a bit unique amongst these top-of-the-line models that are out there, and that it is a fairly easy drive. And indeed, my Cord Hugo 2 transportable DAC amp drove this really well. Because of the cabling that was included in the box that came with this one, I was unable to plug it into my Canon N6 Mark II DAP to check that, but I have a feeling that it would drive it fairly well. And we'll get to the cabling a bit more in just a second, because there are some comments to be made there. But in terms of use case, this becomes an attractive option if you're looking for a transportable setup, for top-of-the-line models and all that. Now, it is open back, so, I wouldn't take it outside on a windy day kind of a thing. But, it is nice to be not tethered to a desk or your listening chair all the time and have the option of transportable, with this level of performance. So I think that's attractive from a use case perspective for some listeners. Now, the driver itself is made of beryllium, and it's Focal's M-shaped dome tech in their driver build. So that's fairly common amongst Focal models, as they like that M-shaped dome. And so this one and the Stellia have the beryllium material as far as the actual material of that dome. All right, the build is, I'll hold it up again. The build is very Focal. If you're familiar with Focal headphones, it looks like a Focal, just blinged out a little bit, so to speak, okay? It has this can spreader thing going on here because, it never fully closes together like many headphones do, but it has the spring-loaded swivel here. It has on the yokes, it pulls out like this, and then it rotates back up in this joint here like Focals do. So, it has the classic Focal build. One of the build features you do get here is that the yoke material here is a carbon fiber, and you can contrast that with the OG Focal Clear here, where the yoke material is actually metal, aluminum, but metal versus the carbon fiber here. All right, so it's just it's a Focal just dressed up a little bit, basically. Okay, in terms of the build and the aesthetic and all of that, I think it looks nice, but again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, kind of a thing. All right, and it does fit on the head quite well. It fits and feels like a Focal does. It stays on the head well. This one, it's not clamping as hard as some other Focals that I have experienced. Now, I got this was loaned to me as a used set, so I don't know if someone, the previous owner, spent some time loosening the clamp or if that's just the way it is. I don't know, but even with the looser, it stays on the head well and so forth. Now, when we talk about Focal headphones, we do need to mention the stock cables. Usually, the stock cables on Focal are just plain bad, right? They are stiff, they have lots of memory, meaning like if you bend them up, they stay kinked, okay? They can tangle and that sort of thing. The cable that came with the Utopia here has at least reached the level of meh, right? It's okay. I mean, it's quite long. It really just has like standard rubber insulation kind of on it. Like here you see a little bit of a kink and a tangle happening right there, but I mean it untwists pretty easy there. This one happens to be a 1/4 inch single-ended termination and all of that. So it's not as stiff, not quite as much of a pain to use as other stock Focal models. But you're probably going to want to buy an aftermarket cable for this headphone because it's still not great, okay? And then I have another complaint about the cabling here on the Utopia. So, I mean, what I just said only matters if you can get past this part, because what I didn't realize, most other Focals, in fact, all other Focals that I have experience with, and it's a good number now. I just showed you the OG Clear. I've reviewed the Clear MG, the Stellia, the Radiance. I owned Elegia for a while. I have Elex in for review. And am I missing any? I don't think so. But anyway, that's a fair number of them. And they've all been dual 3.5 millimeter TS plugs, okay, on here. Stellia, or Utopia, goes a little bit different direction. This is the headphone end of the wire, and I know it's hard to see on there, okay? Try to hold it up there, but there are 2 pins in there. It's a 2-pin connector. That is reset. They're just 2 tiny little pins that are about the same size as pins on like a mini XLR connection, like you would see on an Odyssey or a Dan Clark or a ZMF. Okay, so it's that kind of thing, but there's only 2 pins in there, and so of course the male pins are on the headphone cable, and then we have the female terminations for the 2-pin system here and here. Okay, dual cable entry here on the headphone itself. Now, the thing that I want to point out, when I first opened this and I took the cable out and was looking at it, I was disappointed it wasn't dual 3.5 millimeter. Okay, I don't understand that decision. Maybe Focal had a reason for it, but I don't know. But I held it up and I'm like, ooh, hey, a red dot on the cable. That's helpful. That means the right channel, of course. And then even more, look at the right cup, and sure enough, there is a matching, I hope it shows up well, but there is a matching red dot. Okay? No problem. Great. Except for, then I noticed that both of the cables have, or both terminations have, the red dot. Okay, there's one of them. Let's twist this around so you can see it. And where'd it go? I know it's there. There it is. 2 red dots. What? Okay. And so, yeah, maybe you noticed this a second ago. Okay, red dot. Red dot. Now, this may seem like a little thing. I can kind of get irritated with little things at times. Okay? If you ever meet my family, they'll tell you. All right? Now, in audio, isn't it kind of a convention that red is right? Okay? And that the other color, often blue, maybe it's white, is left? Okay? Red on both sides. I mean, the dot on here and the dots on there are just to help you align the pins on the connectors here so you get everything phased correctly. So that fortunately these only go in one way, and it's just to help you speed that up. But the way you tell left from right on the cable itself is, yeah, probably won't see this on the camera, but there's just a little cutout down there that just has an L. okay, written on it, and an R, a corresponding R on the other side. And so, I mean, thanks a lot, Focal. That is really kind of a pain in the butt. All right, you managed to make the physical part of the cable not as awful as your other cables on your other headphones, but then you did that. Like, what do you have against us audiophiles? I don't know why you're doing this to us. Okay, yeah, it's like if you're gonna use that dot system, make it red on the right and blue on the left. I mean, you manufacture these in France. You're a French company. Your country's flag is blue on the left and red on the right. Anyway, that's enough of that. Okay, back to the headphone itself. Okay, once we get past that cabling thing that clearly irritates me probably more than it should. All right, and then, of course, yeah, the stock pads here on the Utopia have a micro perf. They are very soft, very comfortable. The only complaint that I might have about these was similar to like my Radiance, which is somewhere back there. Okay, in that the black material, if you ever have to like leave these sit for a couple of days or something like that, you can start to see dust showing up on here, and you got to wipe that off before you put them on, or you just have dust on the side of your face. Okay, but that's a minor thing. Okay, all right. So now on with the show, and I'll just go ahead and wear them here as I talk about this. The sound signature. Okay, let's talk about sound. The sound signature I struggled for a while to describe because it's fine. It's not problematic. It's just a little bit different. It is mostly neutral. There is a slight elevation in the air frequencies, way up in the upper treble as you get to like 8K, 9K, 10K, and higher up in that range, okay, which creates a little bit of a shimmer, like on cymbal hits and that sort of thing, but it's not very objectionable to my ear, okay? So just a slight elevation up there. The low end, the bass, is not elevated. In fact, the low bass extension is very good for a dynamic driver headphone. It's not quite flat all the way down to 20 hertz, but the roll-off is fairly gentle, and so you do get a fair amount of energy happening even down at, in your 30 hertz range there in the really, really low sub-bass. Now, the bass, like many Focal headphones, is very quick and punchy. It's got a lot of impact and slam to it. Not Abyss levels of impact and slam. And I say that because I just reviewed the 1266 Phi TC recently. And that had just, huge bass cannon. This is not to that extreme, but it does have the noticeable Focal punch and slam to it in the low end. So while it's not elevating the bass from a frequency response standpoint, that punchiness, I think, does draw the listener's attention, at least it does for me, to the low end more than if it wasn't there. So I think from a perspective standpoint, a listening perspective standpoint, there is a slight perceptive U shape to the signature with a not actual but somewhat perceived elevation in the deep sub bass, and then there is, I think, a little bit of actual measurable elevation in the upper treble, which can create a little bit of a shimmer, although not bad. Okay. The detail retrieval, accepting that there is that Hi-Fi Min R10 out there, which I haven't heard yet. To my knowledge, this is the most resolving dynamic driver headphone out there right now. It has excellent detail retrieval, even in the micro. Like, it brings out room reverbs well, ghost notes, even like things that aren't parts of music, like creaking chairs in a symphonic performance, which, I mean, some people are like, well, creaking chairs are not part of the music. Why do I want to hear those? It's like, well, it's a proxy. If your gear can pull that out, then it can pull out some of the micro stuff in the music that you do want to hear, right? And so, I mean, this can do that pretty well. It is not quite as resolving as some of its planar brethren up in the top of the line, like the Susvara, which I realize is a $6,000 headphone, so $2,000 more than this, but often can be had for around $4,500, which makes the pricing a little more competitive, I think. Or even the 1266, not quite as resolving as that. There is a slight hint of veil when I had those in-house, those other two in-house, and then would go to this in AB, a slight hint of veil, which fades quickly. So it is just a touch behind in resolution on that, but not hugely at all. It's just barely noticeable. Okay, so that's all well and good. Timbre and all that, in terms of just like sounding natural, this is also really good. It's not quite Susvara good, but it's also not far behind. To my ear, it definitely beats the 1266 in it's just sounding natural. Voices sounding like voices, drums sounding like drums, guitars sounding like guitars, piano sounding like pianos, those kinds of things, right? So I really don't have a complaint on that. The timbre and the tonality, Focal has struggled with that throughout their line, but this one, not really. I mean, it's very good. Not perfect. I mentioned that little bit of shimmer up top. Okay. And the mids, a little bit. I mean, I know I say shouty and honky a lot. This only merely hints at that very faintly every once in a while. So, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's very good. Okay. And I think appropriate for the price, really, in terms of timbre and tonality. It's certainly miles ahead of Stelia, which is only $1,000 cheaper than this in that regard. Okay. The staging, the spatial stuff. So most Focal headphones have that kind of wraparound sound stage, almost three-dimensional, that I have described before, as if you're at a symphonic performance. Like Focals and Odysseys and all that do this too, in case you haven't heard Focal but have heard Odyssey, is Focals feel like you're standing on the maestro's stand and things are mostly kind of wrapping around you with a hint of stuff going on behind. Whereas other makers like Hi-Fi Min is a good example, the sound is more out front. Okay, it's more closer to speakers than Focals usually are. This still has a hint of that wraparound Focal effect, though it's not quite as much as the rest of their line, I think. It is a little bit closer to speaker-like. There is still a hint of the wraparound going on, but the depth of the sound field is quite impressive on this. And it is a little bit narrow laterally, so in rare instances, the staging can sound a little bit squeezed this way and exaggerated in terms of depth. Rarely. Not very often, but it can happen. But it does depth better than the vast majority of headphones out there. I mean, it should. It's $4,000, but I mean, it really does the depth well. Is it as good as Susvara in the depth? Maybe. Susvara is a little wider, so it sounds a little more balanced this compared to this. So I don't know if this is actually better at depth. It's just like the more narrow width calls it to your attention a little bit more. But if you like that depth here, that's good. Imaging and separation is very strong. Okay, not quite Susvara level, but it's still very good and sounds to me like it should for about $4,000 in price. Okay, I think that sums up a lot of the sound on this. Okay, for me, a bottom line here is when I listened to this headphone, there was just never a moment where I didn't enjoy it. I think it does well with a wide variety of music. Electronic music sounded really good, punchy, good bass, like that good bass extension with the good bass punch and slam, added a fun element to that. I love hard rock and metal. Those sounded great, even with rapid fire cymbal hits and all that. That shimmer that I noticed is very slight, and it really didn't become fatiguing or anything like that for me. I didn't notice very much shouting or going on in the vocals unless there actually is shouting in the recording. Okay, so all of that. Jazz to me sounded good. Classical sounded good. Vocals sound pretty good. It holds everything together well. It's solid all around. Now, I don't, it is not the best headphone available for any of those genres, okay? But it is really good at all of them. And so it has a kind of a generalist sound to me. And I think that's important, especially when you put it back into the context of it's easy to drive. It's one of the easiest to drive top of the line models out there right now. And so, using a Hugo 2 with it or a DAP or something like that, it like becomes a possibility. Like if you travel a lot, you can take this with you. You're not going to use it on an airplane because it's open back, but once you get to your hotel or your Airbnb or wherever it is you're staying, you can pull this out and enjoy some really good music with your transportable rig. Okay. I think that's a really attractive feature. And then at that point, it's important that it sounds really good with a wide variety of music, because you're probably not going to travel with multiple sets this size. You're not going to be at home where you've got a rack full of headphones, okay, that you can just reach and grab for. So I think that's pretty good. Like it's just a really solid all around headphone. The overall sound quality seems good for the price. It's comfortable. It stays on the head well. Okay. The cabling is annoying. So, you're probably looking at buying your own cable for this anyway, because that's what most of us do when we get to this level of headphone. But yeah, if you need to use the stock cable for whatever reason, it's okay. All right. I don't think I said it yet, so here before I go, I will say that you heard me say that I used my Cord Hugo 2 as source gear for this. I also used my Vioelectric HPA V281 as an amp. I used the RAL HSA 1B as an amp. And I used my Berkeley Audio Designs Alpha S2 as the DAC. Okay, and also I recently reacquired a more mid-fi studio amp in the Lake People G111, and I plugged this into it for a little bit, and that combination sounded pretty good too, right? So, that's still only a handful of amps, so I don't want to say that this one is not amp picky. It probably is. It just still sounded pretty good on all of those, all of that. So, yeah. Overall, pretty good job here, Focal. I have no problems recommending this headphone. It's not perfect. It's just really excellent across the board, I think. And especially attractive, I think, if you are looking for a transportable setup that plays well with a wide variety of music. Okay, I think that's a really attractive feature of this headphone at the top of the line. So I will leave it there. I am Wave Theory. And this has been my review of the Focal Utopia headphone. So until next time, enjoy the music.